Good morning. Welcome to the live in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 1012, When I Am Frightened. The choir version is from the Teal hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but please keep your masks on. And please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1012, When I Am Frightened. Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I'm Grace Preuss, a member of the worship committee, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the worship committee you will hear from include Alec Peck, who is our music coordinator, as well as operating the audio visuals today. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices, please. Our Unitarian heritage calls us to recognize the inherent good of all persons, while the Universalist part of our tradition encourages us to extend love and acceptance to all people. You are welcome in this congregation, whatever your gender or racial identity, faith, tradition, or background. Our principles here on the wall call us to affirm the worth and dignity of every individual, to accept one another, and to foster each other's spiritual growth. So welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning. Although our doors are open, the pandemic is not over. So while we are in the sanctuary, please keep your masks on while singing and take steps to keep each other healthy and safe. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we'd like to share. We will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave up a slide with all of this information, and it is also available on our website. Joys and concerns. Sharing our joys and concerns is one of the important rituals in our community, an opportunity to share milestones, losses, achievements, and experiences with one another. Now that our doors are open, on the first Sunday of each month, we can both hear from those in the sanctuary and read the contributions that we have received. In front of the pulpit, there is a book that you can write your joys and concerns right here whenever you are in the sanctuary. And for those of you at home, you can send your joys and concerns throughout the month to uuchurchofriverside@gmail.com. Our next joys and concerns will be on December 4th. Festival of Lights. The 2022 Mission Inn Festival of Lights will be held from November 25th to December 31st. Downtown light displays will be illuminated from 5 to 10 p.m. UUCR will be open to the public during these festivities. Donations of snacks, bottled water, and individual packages of hot chocolate are appreciated. Please see Robert or Avery for these details. The potluck Thanksgiving meal. UUCR will once again open its doors to our church and local community at the annual Thanksgiving luncheon on November 24th, which will be from noon to 4 p.m. This year, we are asking you to bring or donate a dish to add to the turkey that Robert will be providing. Dishes that accommodate dietary restrictions are also appreciated. There is a sign-up sheet at the membership table today, and your participation will make this a special meal for everyone. We hope to see you there. Thank you. The Social and Environmental Justice Committee meeting is meeting today in the annex at 12 noon. You can find the Zoom link and more information on the website under Social and Environmental Justice. Now we will have the chair of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee, Adam Wedeking, come up and share some announcements.
Morning. I've got two announcements. The first is about the 2022 election season. Is not quite over yet. There is a runoff happening in Georgia for the Senate seat that's open there. And UU the Vote, which is the UUA's voter engagement office, is working on getting out the vote at that election. We're not talking to people about who to vote for and how to vote, just to make sure that everybody votes and gets counted, along with our fifth principle, making sure the use of the democratic process is used. And there are a lot of ways that we can help here in Southern California, who maybe have just finished with some really easy elections and things we weren't all that concerned about. If we really want to help out with what's going on in Georgia, you can go to uuthevote.org/GOTV, stands for Get Out the Vote. There are ways there you can phone, you can call people in Georgia to remind them to vote. You can text people in Georgia to remind them to vote. It's all very easy. You can do it from your home. You don't need to be using your number. They have systems that use their number to send texts and calls. And it's a great way because it always starts with a Zoom meeting, so you get to meet UUs from all over the country who are working on the same thing, and it's a lot of fun. So I would recommend it. Our UUA president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, was part of many of the meetings I was part of leading up to the election. And so I'm looking forward. I think this Georgia runoff will be a lot of fun also. The next thing I'd like to talk about today is Transgender Day of Remembrance. This is a day that was created to remember trans folks who have been victims of transphobia, whether they were killed themselves for being transgender or are victims of suicide because of the way they have been treated in life, being transgendered. In the United States, from October of last year through September of this year, there have been 70 trans folks who have died. If you came in and got this sheet that was folded in half, their names are on here. You can read about them. 390, I believe, globally, deaths. And again, that's violence or acts of suicide. And it's, Really difficult today, if folks have been following the news. Last night, in the middle of the night in Colorado, somebody opened fire on a LGBTQ club in Colorado Springs called, I believe it's called Club Q. So far, the last I've read is at least 5 people have died. So this list of trans folks who have died from transphobia may be growing. I want to read, we got a prayer, but before I read the prayer, I want to read Reverend Susan Frederick Gray's Facebook post from this morning about what happened in Colorado. Absolutely devastating news from Colorado Springs. Sending love and care to all the staff and community of Club Q and to all those present, all the victims and their loved ones. This is infuriating and heartbreaking, especially on this Transgender Day of Remembrance. Acts of violence against trans people and LGBTQ plus people is not unrelated to the policy and rhetorical violence that leaders use to target LGBTQ plus people every day across this country. Policy violence like the anti-trans laws in Alabama and Texas and Ohio incites interpersonal and public acts of violence. This must end. We can do better. We must do better. Our LGBTQ plus siblings are sacred, whole, and divine, and we share a collective responsibility to build a world that affirms the inherent worth and dignity of all. Spirit of life, spirit of love and justice, plant in our hearts the deep knowledge of the gift of every life, of each of our lives, and every life as precious and whole and needed. May we find ways to lean more deeply into practices that nurture wholeness and belonging in all of our communities and all the world. Now I'd like to share this Transgender Day of Remembrance prayer by Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf. On this Transgender Day of Remembrance, we remember those who have been murdered for being who they are, those who face violence on a daily basis, those who have lost loved ones, and those who worry for loved ones. May we come to a time when we cease to shame children around gender roles and expression, where we allow for freedom and exploration of identity and expression, and to a world that operates from love, especially when things are difficult and confusing. May all of us who live with the threat of violence find strength, support, community, hope, and safety from violence. And I also want to say, if you got this sheet on the bottom, there's our church website, uuchurchofriverside.org/justice/TDOR. There are some resources there. There's an article from the UU World about what UUs can do to be better allies to the trans community. There's a great article by Reverend Susan Frederick Gray about why anti-trans and anti-abortion rights laws are an attack on our freedom of religion. And there's also more information on the folks who have died across the world and local organizations that you can help, that you can learn about and donate to and support, that are doing a lot of the work of supporting the LGBTQ folks in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That concludes our announcements for today. And now I invite you to take a slow, deep breath, sit back as we move into the worship hour. You are welcome to read with me the mission statement of our church. Our mission is to foster a diverse religious community that celebrates life, affirms the individual, encourages spiritual growth and open thought, and works to advance social justice and environmental sustainability. The sermon that we will be reading today was written by Reverend Dr. Marilyn Sewell. The Reverend Dr. Marilyn Sewell is Minister Emerita of the First Unitarian Church in Portland, Oregon, where she served for 17 years before her retirement in 2009. She is the editor of 4 Beacon Press anthologies, including the award-winning Cries of the Spirit. She is the subject of a documentary film, Raw Faith, which was directed by Peter Wiedensmith, which won the PBS Human Spirit Award at its premiere at the Nashville Film Festival in 2010. Radical hospitality. What is radical hospitality? How do we practice it? And what does it look like? Human beings have a built-in tribalism that needs to be challenged consciously and intentionally. A congregation committed to radical hospitality would go beyond seeking out others like themselves and open its hearts to accept all who seek a spiritual home and community. Today, we will examine how we can make hospitality a part of our spiritual practice. We have two lightings of sacred flames. The first is the occupied Indigenous Peoples Remembrance Candle. The second is a lighting of our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. We walk upon the traditional territories of diverse and sovereign peoples, the original people of this land who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. This spot we occupy was first the sacred space of several groups of Indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla, the Cupeño, and the Serrano. We, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside, light this sacred flame as the stewards of this sacred and holy place. We are blessed with a space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equity, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threatens the earth and her people, and to be part of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. Today's reading for the chalice lighting is by Betsy Dar. May the light of this chalice give light and warmth to our family. On good days and bad, happy and sad. And may we feel the warmth spread from our family circle to wider and wider circles until we feel our family part of the one circle of life. Thank you. We have a tradition at UUCR to welcome those who are visitors or perhaps returning after some time away. We know it can be uncomfortable to stand up and speak in front of others, and so I will now ask for a volunteer for someone who has been here a while to tell us your name and how you found out about our church. We ask you to step close to the mic up here in the front and speak into it directly and clearly so that everyone can hear. Please be aware that you will be visible on our Zoom camera and in the recording of this service, which is posted online. Do we have any church members who would like to volunteer today? Linda, thank you. Please step up and come forward to the mic. Tell us your name, how long you have been here, and how you found out about our church.
Hi, my name is Linda Van Voris. I've been here since 1996. I've actually been a member since 1997. I found out about the church just by being a resident. At the time, I was going through a teenage crisis in my family, and I was looking for support, and I came here, and that's what I found, and I've been here ever since. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And that's how it's done. If you are new here, a visitor, or an old friend, please raise your hand to stand and come up to the mic in front of the pulpit. Do we have any takers today? Brave soul. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Marcus. My wife, Meg, is with me. My sister-in-law, Gina, is with me. We found out about your church through my wife's seeking on the computer. One thing we are looking for is a church that encompasses all beliefs for everyone. And you seem to have that just by hearing what you had said today. So we thought we'd come and check you guys out. And we've got a nice facility here. And thank you for welcoming us.
Thank you for coming in. Welcome. If there is someone online who would like to introduce themselves, please raise your hand and we will call on you by Zoom. Please let us know who you are, where you are from, and how you found out about us. Okay. For any other new guests, please join us for socializing and coffee hour after the service. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. If you have not already done so, please leave your name before you leave so that we know you are here, and leave your contact information if you'd like to know about upcoming events. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. Our hymn now is number 123, Spirit of Life from the Gray Hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but again with your masks on. Please stand and embody your spirit and join us in singing number 123, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life,
This portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished in several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown here. You may also contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is shown here, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see either me or Robert today to purchase the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity. And to those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? Thank you, Linda. Our next hymn is number 402, From You I Receive, from the Gray Hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but again with your masks on. Please stand in body or spirit and join us in singing number 402, From You I Receive.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live. From you I receive, together we share, and from this we live.
Our meditation today is by William F. Schultz. I invite you to read with me the bold italicized lines that will be on the projection. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Now let us pause for a moment of silence and reflection. Now, I would like to introduce Adam Wedeking, who will be reading us the sermon, Radical Hospitality. Adam? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. This reading came from the UUA website, and the text does not necessarily reflect the personal view of the reader.
Thank you. Radical hospitality. Radical means out of the ordinary, revolutionary even. So what would it mean to receive someone, a stranger, with a presence that was not just polite, but to receive them with revolutionary generosity? Activist Rosemary Harding remembers her growing up days in the South. She especially remembers the hospitality of her mother, Ella Lee, and her grandmother, Moira, or Mama Rai. Mama Rai was born in Africa, was a slave in Virginia, and died in 1930 at the age of 107. Both these women cultivated a deep hospitality, Harding says, as well as a profound mystic spirituality. In the years that Harding was growing up, her house was a regular stop for neighbors and relatives and friends. Her mother and father made the house welcoming, sometimes too welcoming, it seemed, for all kinds of people came through. Not just neighbors and friends, but peddlers, professional gamblers, petty thieves, prostitutes, and people we would probably call homeless today. Her mother would set out beautiful china dishes and slices of her homemade pound cake for all of them, especially for the ones just passing through. It was as if she knew that they needed special attention. And besides, she genuinely enjoyed hearing their stories and learning from them. She knew that wisdom came from many sources. An itinerant bookseller would come now and then for a visit. He would sit down with Mom there in the dining room and talk for hours about the events of the day and about books. The man was not always very clean, and sometimes, Harding says, we children could smell the mustiness of his ragged clothes and the sweat of his body. His speech was strange too, and we children were tempted to laugh, she says, but if we did so much as let out a snicker, Mom would cut her eyes at us and set us straight. Harding goes on to say, the efforts my parents made to be neighborly and to reserve judgment against those who society viewed as outcasts served as an important example for their children and grandchildren as we grew into adulthood. Hospitality was the foundation of my family's spirituality. Hospitality is a word with a spiritual history, as a matter of fact. Monasteries grew up around the 5th century. Strangers in need could come there for care. The first primitive hospitals, in fact, begin there. Hospital, hospice, hospitable, hospitality, all from the same root word, meaning generous, caring, sustaining. The most famous of these monasteries was that of Saint Benedict. Benedict created a book of rules to live by, called the Rule of Saint Benedict, which is still used today by many monasteries. The foundation of the rule is listening. Listen with the ear of your heart, Benedict writes. And yet the kind of warm-hearted generosity described by Rosemary Harding is more difficult in our day and age. More difficult in the city than in the small town. More of us live in places distant from our relatives, places where neighbors come and go, and there is not that continuity of place that gives us the confidence to allow the stranger in. When I grew up in that little Louisiana town of 5,000, we never locked our door. After all, not a single neighbor ever moved the whole time I lived there. Not only did I know all of our neighbors, I knew all their dogs, and I was in and out of their homes most of the folks. I was in and out of the homes of most of these folks, some more than others. It's different now. I'm a single woman in the city. I'm vulnerable. My door stays locked. I don't want to move back to that little town, move away from the stimulation and the progressive values of the city. But I have to ask, what have I lost? Robert Putnam, the Harvard political scientist, best known for his book, Bowling Alone, in which he writes of the growing isolation of Americans, Robert Putnam has done some new research, and his conclusions have been surprising. He wanted to find out what happens when diverse groups of people live in the same area, as opposed to a homogeneous group of people living in an area. He found that when people are near people unlike themselves, they tend to hunker down. Not only do they not interact as much with people who are different from themselves, but they don't interact with their own group as much. They watch more TV, they have fewer friends, they are less likely to work on community projects. The level of trust and interaction is greatest when people are with others who are most like themselves. When these results came back, Putnam distrusted what he saw, and so did his colleagues. So he spent years more checking out his data. 30,000 people were interviewed. And yes, he found that he was right. Putnam, a dyed-in-the-wool progressive and very pro-diversity, nevertheless concludes, in the face of diversity, most of us retreat. Another study shows that churches that try to bridge social divisions have a tough job. Paul Lichterman, in his book Elusive Togetherness, says that churches that attempt to bridge strong social differences mean well, but are most often not successful. He says when churches in his study try to do outreach, differences in social customs and in styles of relating made it nearly impossible for faith-based efforts to close the gaps. He said that the single group in his study that did succeed consistently evaluated and reevaluated what they were doing and why they were doing it, in order to understand their own cultural underpinnings and those of others. In other words, they paid close attention to how they were talking, interacting, and engaging on a daily level. They learned to approach others as partners rather than as people they were helping. Success, in other words, lies not so much in ideology or organizational structure, but in the detailed content of our conversations. So what does this mean for us as a church? We are committed to being a welcoming community. We say we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all. And yet, we are human beings, and we have the same challenges that all human beings have. We feel more comfortable when we're with people we know. We come to church, we gravitate to people we know. We feel less comfortable when we are with people who have different ideas and interests, different cultural assumptions. Tribalism is strong, and we need look no further than our church. Let's talk about some of the people who might actually visit our church and imagine to what extent they might feel welcomed. And the examples I'm giving are not unlike people who have actually visited our church. A young woman with an infant in her arms. When the baby starts to whimper during service, she begins breastfeeding. A Native American with long, dark hair comes in. A man from a Pentecostal background waves his hands in the air during the singing of Spirit of Life. A beautifully bedecked woman in a flowered print dress with matching high heels and purse. She is 6'4" and clearly transgender. A person who speaks out of turn and can't follow the hymns. He seems to be mentally ill. A well-dressed couple. The man has an American flag on the lapel of his suit, and they have their Bibles with them. A homeless man who hasn't bathed in a week. A woman with a guide dog. A serviceman back from Iraq in uniform visiting with his aunt and uncle. A 21-year-old who just graduated from college back east and moved out here to find his first job. He knows no one in town. He is African American. Let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation in which you felt utterly alone? In a new town or city where you knew no one? I've experienced this more than once, and it doesn't feel good. One time was during the late 1960s when I taught summer school in one of LBJ's programs for disadvantaged children in New Orleans. It turns out that I was the only white person in the school, student or teachers. I remember that nobody wanted to park their car next to mine in the staff parking lot. I learned a lot about how it feels to be different that summer and alone. There are those who come to this city every year, and many who come to this church, who are coming to start a new life. They move here because of some kind of major transition, a new job, the loss of a spouse, or simply the desire to start over in a great city. But even in gorgeous, livable Portland or Riverside, starting over isn't easy. We miss the friends we left behind, our old familiar restaurants, our hairdresser. It takes a long time to rebuild a community of comfort and belonging. But there is the church, a church. Our church, we hope, might be a place where a wayfaring stranger could find respite, acceptance, a new beginning. People don't dress up and come downtown to church on Sunday morning on a whim. People are here because they need to be here. I hope we would be called a friendly church, a hospitable church. And I think that we are. But do we practice radical hospitality? And if we did, what would that look like? Churches typically offer personal support to their members, but often stop there. A congregation committed to radical hospitality would go beyond seeking out others like themselves for mutual support. Such a congregation would recognize the humanity of anyone who walks into that church. And such a congregation would concern themselves with people who feel beyond the reach of organized religion. The public theology of such a church would not only be limited to charity, which after all puts the receiver one down, but would also be committed to justice. Surely this is a part of our mission at this church. Right now in this country, a strong church sanctuary movement is growing in response to new pressures on illegal immigrants. I haven't been around this summer while this movement was building, but I want to challenge the church to evaluate in what way we might want to be a part of this movement, which is surely a huge issue of hospitality for this whole country at the moment. We call them guest workers, don't we? So radical hospitality is a term that rolls easily off the tongue. To actually carry it out is a demanding undertaking. But we are not a department store, not a government agency, not an HMO. In all these places, one would expect to be received politely, as it were, served, as is our due. No, we are a church, and it is appropriate that we ask ourselves, what is the moral dimension of our hospitality? The moral dimension of our reception of others, our solidarity with others who may not look like us or move from the same assumptions or values. I'm not talking about being politically correct or legalistic. I'm talking about hospitality as a spiritual practice. I'm not talking about just opening the doors. I'm talking about opening the heart. Yes, bringing diverse people together is difficult. I think we have established that. This is not because people are bad. It's because human beings have a built-in tribalism that needs to be challenged consciously, intentionally. What then opens the heart and brings people who are different together? It is not ideology or theology, nor is it form that brings people together. It is content and it is conversation. It's the universals that all people care about, their children, this good earth, an end to mindless violence, a yearning for peace. Let me give you some examples. A couple of years ago, a professor at Molenma Bible College invited me to speak at a conference. Many of you know how I struggled with that speech, how I woke up in the night writing speech after angry speech, and how I finally came down to what we had in common, Jesus. My talk was entitled, "Will the Real Jesus Please Stand Up?" And I said some things that may have been hard for them to hear, especially how hurtful their stance on homosexuality has been to my people. But as one who is raised a Southern Baptist and who does love Jesus, I stood on their ground as one of them. And then when our General Assembly came to Portland this past June, I invited that same professor, Dr. Paul Metzger, to speak about environmental issues at an outdoor rally. He came and he was enthusiastically received. He is one of the evangelical leaders who is speaking out on climate change. He wants his children and grandchildren to have a viable life on this earth, and so do I. And as a Christian, he cares about what the failure of the ecosystem will do to the poorest of the poor. And so do I care. There is a lot that draws us together. And then Mark Sledgers, our Minister of Music, and some of our choir members participated yesterday in Proper, People Reaching Oppressed People Expecting Restoration. a festival for diverse groups involved in social justice activities. One of the organizers was Pastor Albert Mondane, who was here with his gospel choir on July 15th, and we'll be back on September 22nd. Mark your calendars. Mondane has led his gospel musicians into some pretty amazing places recently. He took them into Pennsylvania, to the Amish town where the girls were killed, and his musicians sang for those people in their grief. And most recently, he took a group to Utah, to the site where 6 miners lie buried thousands of feet under the ground, and where 3 others died trying to rescue them. How different are his African-American gospel singers from the Amish farmers and from those white miners in their strongly conservative state of Utah? And yet grief is the common cause of all of us. We all love and we all lose, and music can be that bridge connecting one to the other. I speak of radical hospitality today because there is a world out there that needs home, that needs community. And I want to stretch spiritually, to stretch ourselves open. I know that when we take the risk, yes, of course we'll blunder, we'll make mistakes. Believe me, I've blundered more than once. But when we take the risk, our lives will grow so much richer and deeper, because we will have extended ourselves. Our creativity will blossom, for we will not be stuck with our old assumptions, our narrow waves of perceiving reality. Our world will grow wider and softer and more trusting. In closing, let me share a note that I received just this last week. This note was from a grandmother who had mentioned to me in passing concern about her granddaughter. The little girl was to start her first day of school this last Friday, and she was the only white child in her class. How would her granddaughter respond? Would she feel other? Would she feel left out? Then I got this note on Saturday, which I will read in part. I wanted you to know that my granddaughter loved her first day at school. Being the only white child never affected her. She made a new friend, loved the free chocolate milk, and gave up her homemade lunch to join the others for a free lunch. I've concluded that it is often our fears as adults that can muddy the waters for these young people who already know how to love. Now we have to pause and ask some questions. Would it be the same if her grandchild were the only child of color in the class? And will it be the same when her granddaughter begins to see class differences and begins to understand all that free lunch implies? These are open questions. Nevertheless, the essential rightness of this final statement of the note remains. It's adults who muddy the water. Young people already know how to love. I have seen this attitude shift hugely in my lifetime, and that shift comes from the young people. It comes from our children. We who are perhaps less malleable need to notice and to learn. So be it. Amen.
Thank you, Adam. Our closing hymn now is number 69, Give Thanks, from the Gray Hymnal. Again, feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but with your masks on. Please stand and embody your spirit and join us in singing number 69, Give Thanks.
Give thanks for the corn and the wheat that are reaped, for labor well done, and for barns that are heaped, for the sun and the dew and the sweet honeycomb, for the rose and the song and the harvest brought home. Give thanks for the mill and the farms of our land, for craft and the strength in the work of our hands, for the beauty our artists and our friendships have brought. Give thanks for the homes that with kindness are blessed, for seasons of plenty and well-deserved rest, for our country extending from sea unto sea, for ways that have made it a land for the free.
Our benediction today is Each of Us Ministers to a Weary World by Darcy Roque. Please join me in reading the bold italicized words. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance. There is too much pain in this world to not heal. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence. Namaste, amen, and blessed be. Once again, thank you, Adam, for sharing your valuable time and reading us the sermon for today. It is sincerely appreciated, and we are sure we will see you again. We will have 10 to 15 minutes of discussion for any observations or thoughts that you may have on today's topic. Please be aware that this will be included on the video that is posted. For those of you who would like to skip this portion, you are now welcome to adjourn to the parish hall, and we will join you after the session for more fellowship. Is there anyone who'd like to comment on today's service? So first we'll have Diane.
I wasn't here last Sunday. Here I come. Slowly but surely. I'm going to try to cut this down and not make it a mini series. I was not here last Sunday, and I'm a visitor. I'm not a member, but I found something very inspirational in this church. The message of universality and diversity and all these wonderful thoughts that are positives towards love and how that can unite people. I had a visiting aunt in her 90s who came to see me. She was coming because she was going out to see the burial ground of my husband, and she hadn't had the chance to be here because things happened, COVID and her illnesses and also mine, but she came and I went with her on Sunday. Prior to that, her joy is getting out to go to restaurants when she has a chance. So I had not been to a restaurant that she wanted to go to, the furthest I've ever driven since my husband passed away, but a very important restaurant because that's where he proposed to me over 50 years ago. We went to that restaurant, and while we were there, my aunt, who is very limited in her thinking, very tribal, as I am also, she happens to be on one end of the thinking scale, and I happen to be on the other. She comes to California and is concerned because she's coming to where those people in California are, and her thinking is a little different than perhaps some in California, whatever that means. Well, we went to that restaurant, and sitting in that restaurant, we were eating and thinking about what we shared, the love of this man who was her elderly lady, taking care of him when he was a little bitty boy, and she loved him a lot, and was coming to visit this precious man who now was in the grave. I was, of course, having had him for over 50 years, grateful to have a chance to share that love we felt for this man. While we're talking about that in the restaurant, behind us, there were two ladies sitting, a very tall lady, and my aunt, with her mindset, said, "Do you think that person is a man? I can't tell, that person is tall." I'm pretty neutral about that, and I said, "You know, let's have our wonderful meal. But you could see there was something there that she was wondering about from these people behind us. Well, the meal went forward. We were there and united in this lovely restaurant. And then came the bill. At that time, the waitress said, "Your bill was paid for." Who paid for it? The people who were sitting behind us. We'll never be able to thank them, but they expressed love and gave kindly to two grumpy old ladies who were sharing the chance to remember a husband, and also happened to be in a restaurant where a proposal was given over 50 years ago. And that was the story I wanted to share, because kindness can unite us. Even though we may have different thoughts, for that moment, people we didn't even know stepped up, regardless of what their history was. It wasn't ours to be concerned about, but what we took away from it. And my aunt said, "I've heard of that happening. I've never experienced it." I don't think it was a coincidence. Never had to say thank you to those people, but in her heart, I think it opened a door. And it isn't that we judge by how people look. We have to judge by what they do. And even there, we don't judge. We just embrace that when we're given a gift. We were given a gift that day. And I think that is the thing she considers the highlight of the trip, where she had a chance to say goodbye to my husband's burial, but also had a chance to see that in the living, we're all in it together, and love does make a difference. And we experienced kindness from strangers. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, should we have Pat or Lee first? Pat, how do we? Okay. Okay, so we're gonna let Lee speak first, and then we'll have you come up. Okay, Pat, is that all right? Okay. So Lee?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Adam, for delivering that beautiful sermon, which is so appropriate. I really appreciate the illustrations in that sermon, which show why our tradition, Universalist Unitarian, has transcended centuries of tribalism in religion to bring spirituality in a universal sense. And I very much appreciate the message this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lee. Now we have Pat.
I'm Pat Kowunder, and I also wanted to say that thank you, Adam, for reading that so well. I loved that idea of radical hospitality, but it reminded me, over the years, I've often gone to the Benedictine monastery up in the high desert, and they do practice a kind of hospitality. The monks will, in the morning after Mass and stuff, at the breakfast, they'll come over and say, "Did you sleep well?" And you go, "Oh, what?" Anyway, it really is a thing that I think in this church particularly, we should focus on and work on, being friendly to whoever comes in the door. I know for me, sometimes I just don't have it, but when I do, I try and reach out. So that's it.
Thank you, Pat. Linda?
I'd like to add on to that. I thought that was just I don't want to say a lovely sermon, because it was more than that. It was really profound for me. As a practicer, of course, of miracles, that's part of the practice. Kindness is kindness to other people that will resolve all of the hate. And I know a lot of times that looks overwhelming, because it seems like, particularly if you bother listening to the news, that there's so much hate in the world. I don't think that's true. I think that we get bombarded with that, but that's not the truth. But I think the thing that opened me up a little bit from this is we do work on hospitality in the church. Probably not as much as we should, but we do. But I think where we fail, and UUs are not real good at proselytizing. But my feeling is you don't need to do that by going out and saying, oh, I go to this wonderful church. Will you come? But it's doing things like the people did for Diane in the restaurant. It's how you treat people daily, all the time. That's radical hospitality, because that's what will bring people in. I mean, it flows that way. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you for that, Linda. Was there anyone else who'd like to share? Adam? Adam's doing a lot for us today.
I just want to share something that I read recently that I thought about as I was preparing this, reading this sermon. The story in the sermon about the study of people sort of struggling when they're in diverse communities. I am reading a book right now called The Sum of Us, and it discusses really sort of what racism has taken from us as a country. And there's an article there about living apart, the fact that so much division and segregation has led to really segregated living for some people, specifically for white folks. People of color tend to live in very diverse areas. White folks tend to grow up in very white areas. But the article, the book I was reading actually discussed a study that showed that children, white children who go to school in diverse schools do better in school than white kids who go to school in all white schools. And it's obvious, I think, that it's obvious that they would have better sort of social skills and be able to deal with different people differently. But there's something in that, being around different people that kind of encourages, I think, critical thinking and viewing things from different points of view that kind of open you up to more ideas and make things, I think, easier to learn than when it's just sort of everybody sees things the same way. And I think it's interesting how that kind of contrasts with the study in the sermon. But I think the key is that these were children, right? And that point made at the end that children know how to love. And so wherever this tribalism comes from, whether it's something we're born with, or it's something that kind of we learn as we grow up in tribalized, situations, definitely I think we can change that. And by sort of following the younger generation is a great way to do that. So.
Thank you, Adam. Okay. So the next comment will be the last, if anyone has something to share. Okay. Oh. Hello, Walt.
Actually, this is similar to what Linda said. I think probably if a person practices in their daily life to be kind, that then it'll spill over into institutions like a church. I know I keep getting pulled into oddball situations when someone will ask me in front of a grocery store, can I spare some change? And I always figure, well, are they going to get cash and buy drugs, or do they really want food? And so I'll usually say, I'll buy you food. Let's go inside the store. And some will take me up on it. Others, of course, just want money for, I guess, drugs and will refuse. The only thing is sometimes the person will take me in, and when I mentioned $20 worth of food, it'll turn into $120 or $150 worth of food. And they don't necessarily say thank you. And I do tend to get drawn into their world at that point because I think they are surprised that someone will help them. And of course, they would like to lean on me further. And so then I do get to glimpse their world to a point where I feel that I don't want to be pulled in anymore into sometimes a zany looking situation. And so then I have to choose to back out. The result is that I have several very rich experiences to remember, even though at the time I was torn between how much longer to observe and when to bail. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, so that concludes our discussion session. You're now free to adjourn into the parish hall for refreshments. And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.